Well, hey, everyone, thank you very much for joining our April user group meeting for 2026. We appreciate you all joining. So, Angela, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is our standard meeting agenda. We'll go through our introductions. We will have both a summit and a learners update. We're also going to talk about our upcoming events before we get into our educational sessions, and then we'll transition just to an open forum in our general discussion. So also, I will have to leave here in about 30 minutes. I have another overlapping meeting. So Angela, if you don't mind just taking over at that point.
Okay.
All right, so these are our 2026 board members. These are the volunteers that have dedicated their time to, help create all the content that you guys see through Dynamics Communities. So if there's ever a time where you are looking for something in particular, or you would like to see something presented, maybe it's a specific topic about manufacturing or supply chain or accounting, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'd be more than happy to hear your feedback. So we can go to the next slide, and we're going to go ahead and do our summit update.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. This is Pam Mashalik from Dynamic Communities. So super excited about Summit coming up. We had a record number of submissions for Call for Speakers this year with over 2,000. So our programming committees are now this month going through and doing their ratings and talking through all of the sessions so we can round it down to the ones that we'll be able to have at the event. But it was a really good showing, and we had a lot of net new speakers as well. So people who have never spoke at Summit in the past. And then we're also working with Microsoft on their sessions. So Michael met with Lada from Microsoft about what BC sessions that they're going to want. And then we also are working with the other products like Copilot, Power Platform, and so forth as well. So we are expected to release the agenda May 20th, and we're still on track to do so. Numbers as they start, we have 450 attendees who have registered for so far that picked Business Central as their primary product, where that field is one where they can only pick one, and they picked BC. And then we have installed, we have 550, and like 420 of those are users. So pretty good progress. And of course, our sponsor numbers are looking well as well. So I think it's going to be a really good event that it's shaping up towards. If you have any questions about Summit, you can feel free to put them in the chat, and we can answer them. But I think that's the Summit update. So next we do have Academy. So these are the Academy sessions that we have. So if you are interested in classroom training prior to Summit, these are the list of Business Central ones that we have. If you are in a position to be able to help evangelize these to the community, if you're a partner, invite your clients to be able to participate in these as well. That would be super helpful. So we can get more education awareness out prior to the event. And then we also are going to have 2 pre-cons as well. One is going to be a Copilot Studio bootcamp with Dwayne Robinson. So that is going to like a deep dive into like using Copilot Studio with hands-on classroom experience, as well as a governance and access control pre-con as well. So if you're trying to figure out AI in your business and security and governance is getting in your way, which is usually pretty typical. The first problem you find out is you have a data problem. And the next problem you find out is you have a security problem. And so we're going to break that down in a pre-con for folks as well. So those will be 2 others areas to take advantage of. And then in the slide, there's a link where then it'll take you to be able to register for any of those and take advantage of it. So next slide. Learners. Let's talk about learners for a few minutes. My favorite topic. So the Learners platform was created for the community. It was created for you guys so we could create events in person and online and have a platform to connect the community together. So with that, if you have not joined Learners, please join and then join a group. So at the group level that's when you'll start getting communications from us on events that have been set up. So if you just join, but you don't join a group, you're not going to get communications. So you'll want to make sure that you join a group. So then you'll get emails about events that are being planned in the future. So yeah, so join a group. If you're interested and you're looking out and you don't see content that you're looking for, you can feel free in your group to click the contact us button, and that will email the leaders of that group, or you can start a discussion and explore that. If you're not sure what you want, like you're like, I don't really know what I need, because maybe I'm a user and I'm not sure, you can feel free to do that contact, and it'll send an email to the group and we can have a conversation about it and find out kind of what are your learning goals, and kind of explore what that could look to you. So it's part of that platform and we're here to help with that. If you're an ISV or a partner, partners can create their own events. So you can create an event for your clients and then invite the community to come along with you. If you're an ISV, you can create events that include your ISV products. So you can do training on your ISV products, or even, let's say, a industry type based event as well. So then you can kind of have maybe some partner, a couple ISVs together and create a day that would dive deep into a specific industry. Those are all things that are possible in this platform. And if you're an MVP, you can create like MVP events as well, to advocate the content that you normally do. So all those options are available. And if you're a buyer or end user, you can create your own event, or you can work with the leaders here and we can design one for you. So anyway, so join the leaders platform, super exciting. Let's go to the next slide. These are the meetings that are currently set up. And then we have our road shows. So we're traveling around the country doing 1 day free events for the community. Chicago is actually a 2-day event. So that's May 5th and 6th, which is our next one that's coming up. At that stop, the first day is an industry day and the second day is a product day. So we're trying something new with that one. And then the rest of the cities is just 1 day where there's a business central track in each one of those cities. And it's a free event and lunch is included. And then, of course, our national user group meetings are listed here. And I know we're working on April meetings as well. So if you're not seeing what you're looking for, just ask. And it's something that with this platform, we can build it out. So next slide. This is a progress for learners. As you can see, it's growing. It's getting better and better each month. Our page views are increasing each month. We have imported all of our active users. So this did not include our entire database because of GDPR and all that kind of fun stuff. But we did import users that have been active in the last 2 years. So that data is already in there. There's 26 future events already set up in the system. And we do have plans to launch learners further. So there's marketing emails that's going to talk about what is learners, how to join, why you should join. And then also drawing for speakers, like let's build up about some more content and so forth. So you're going to be seeing more from us in the future around the learners, but progress is definitely happening. So we're moving in the right direction, which is super cool.
Yes, it's great to see that BC is the highest percentage here too.
It is, exactly. The VC by far is the top group. So you guys are killing it. You are growing exponentially compared to the others. So thank you so much for all your engagement. Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, Pam, we do have a question before we move forward. There in the chat, somebody Sabrina wanted to understand the summit registration numbers, basically the difference between BC installed, BC primary, and users registered.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So BC primary. So we have multiple fields. So we have one field that's your primary product. So we ask them, what's your primary one? And they can only pick one thing. So that's the primary number, is that's they pick Business Central. And then we have what products do you use? And then they can pick multiple products. So that's the BC installed means that they say they're using Business Central. So, but their primary reason for coming might not be BC. Maybe they're going to go there for AI or, Power Platform or something like that. And then users registered is like how many, because those BC installed and BC primary could be, partners, users, others, Microsoft, anybody, where the user number is the actual number of users that are registered. So not including partners and ISVs and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Sabrina. Okay. Upcoming webinars. David is working on filling April, so stay tuned. But this is the list of sessions that are events that we have coming up. And then a big thank you and kudos to everyone, because like we had a March event, AI in BC, with 110 registrants, about 60 people attended. So the activity is building, thanks to all the work that the program, the committee has done and the board has done and all of that. Aaliyah's Inventory 101 had 63 registered, 38 attended, and this is on a platform that has been recently launched. And so I think these numbers will continue to grow, and this will be our next platform to bring the community together. But really, really strong numbers so far. And again, if you are looking for any type of content, let us know and we can build some out. And we are also looking for speakers. So touch base with Blaine and David if you have a topic that you would like to share and speak on, because we're always looking for new talent and new speakers. And don't forget to sign up for learners and join the group. I don't see any other questions in the chat now that I have it pulled up. I think we can go next to Ben.
Yeah, I think we're.
Oh, nice.
Unless anybody else has any questions on our upcoming events.
I'll add to that we've got August and September already in the works. We already have 2 excellent speakers on awesome topics. We're just picking the day and getting it on the calendar. So thanks to the community for responding to our call for content, if you will. This Learners platform is off to a pretty great start, and continuing these and then storing these and making them accessible afterwards, I think, is adding a lot of value to the community. So we'll keep covering more and more diverse topics. And if you have something that you want to present on, by all means, reach out and we'll work on scheduling the time with you. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. We have 2 great speakers, or session presenters, I guess I should say, Ben Baxter and Andrew Good. Ben's going to go first. So I'm going to stop sharing. Ben, take it away.
All right. All right, you should be able to see it now.
Yeah, you're good to go.
All right, awesome. So my first topic is going to be planning, MRP, MPS. So those are just acronyms for planning, where to start and how to dial in the results. So to give you an idea of this, we're going to kind of talk about what is MRP, how do you set it up inside of Business Central, and how do you run it. And the agenda to do so, I'll give you a little intro on myself, but very briefly. And then the plan is to just run it all inside of Business Central. So I have a slide deck here. It has all of the notes for what I'm going to talk about, but instead of having you feverishly write everything down, know that I've already put it into the slide deck. So do make sure that you get a hold of this after the meeting. But I'm going to run through it all in Business Central so you can see it in action. All right. And so a little bit about me. My name is Ben Baxter. I'm the president of Accent Software. We are a Business Central partner. I spend a lot of time playing on the Microsoft forums. So I've gotten the title of Microsoft super user, which just means that I know some stuff and I answer questions well and people verify them. So that's good. I'm part of the Summit Programming Committee. This year, I'm part of the manufacturing track. So I'm excited for it. I know we've got a lot of great sessions coming up. And if you don't get picked, just understand there was some really great content out there. So Hopefully you do, but I'm part of that team. Our business, Accent Software, we specialize in manufacturing, but MRP and what I'm going to talk about today works for everybody. So it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you deal with items in any way, shape, or form, this will apply to you. So hopefully everybody knows what an item is, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. And I am on the Ask the Expert panel. So I've earned the title BC Expert, I guess. But without further ado, we're going to jump into Business Central. So the majority of this will be spent just stepping through Business Central. So that's what I have up on screen. Don't get too caught up on the profile and the look and feel of the screens. I'm going to sit in pretty much the planning worksheet for the majority of the presentation so that we can talk about what's happening based on changes I make in the back end. And I will show all of those as well. Now, I said planning worksheet, not the requisition worksheet. There are two options here. I recommend everybody use the planning worksheet over the requisition worksheet. It has a stronger engine and it does the exact same information in terms of processing supply and demand and giving recommendations. So while the requisition worksheet used to be the only option for people in the Essentials license, it's available for everybody now. So planning worksheet should be where you go when you're doing planning. And so that's where we're going to spend the majority of time. Now, while I said we're not going to go into items, we are going to go into stock keeping units. So I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody that is in a multi-location planning scenario to use stock keeping units. The only time you use the planning parameters on the item card itself is if you're setting it up initially and you're going to push it out to all of your locations, or if you are in a single location environment, then it is okay at that point to use items specifically. But as soon as you have two locations and you need to do planning, you need to have stock keeping units in place. So that's where we're going to go today. I've set up some examples. So I've set up a location called MRP. You don't have to do that. That's just for this demo so that we have very specific data. We're going to look at pretty much all of these, but I want to start with a very simple example and talk through what things to look for on either the item or the stock keeping unit, because they both have a planning tab. Now, the replenishment tab, I haven't minimized. There's a critical field on here, which is the replenishment system. So this determines what the system suggests for you. So it can be a purchase, a production order if you're in manufacturing, transfer if you move between locations, and then an assembly if you're into kitting or light manufacturing. Those are the only four choices. This transfer option is only available on stock keeping units because it does require multiple locations, at which point you should be using SKUs. So that is where that is housed. So if you're on an item and you're looking for it, it does not exist there. It is only on a stock keeping unit. But there will always be a selection here. There is no blank option. So in this case, it's purchase, which means it'll recommend a purchase order for me. If it was on production order, it would simply recommend a production order. Okay, so the only thing that controls is what the recommendation is. It does not prevent you. If I had this set as production order, it does not prevent me from buying this item at a specific SKU. So even if we normally make this item at this location, I can still buy it to that location. So if I got behind on my capacity planning, my schedule gets out of whack, whatever the case may be, it doesn't prevent me from buying it or producing it or assembling it. It's just, what is your standard operation? In my case, we'll start with purchase. It's simple. And then we're going to jump down to planning. And planning is the everything. It is the guts behind planning. The planning worksheet and the requisition worksheet both look to the same fields in the same place. So whether you use requisition or planning worksheet, they both pull from the same data source. So that's why I say it's interchangeable, but you should definitely use the planning worksheet just because it's a stronger back-end engine. All right, so the very most important field on the planning tab is this reordering policy, okay? This one is currently blank. That is a valid option. A lot of people get tripped up on this, that they think, well, if I use planning, I have to use planning for every item in my system. And that is not the case. Blank reordering policy simply means that you're going to manually plan that item or that item at that location. So it is a very viable option. It just means that the system is not going to give you a recommendation for that record. It will only be manually planned. Every other policy, depending on the criteria, the data, supply and demand of your system, will give you recommendations. So at this point, if I select any of these options, it will factor it into the calculation and determine whether to give me a suggestion or not. So just because I have one set, so if I come and say order, well, this item or this record does not have any demand whatsoever. So if I set it to order and I go and run my planning, I'm still not going to get a suggestion, even though I have my reordering policy set. So just because you have one set does not mean you get a suggestion. It just means it's factored into the calculation. All right, so let's talk through where to start. Okay, there's really two places, and it's this fixed reorder quantity or lot for lot. Fixed reorder is a stock policy. When I select fixed reorder, two fields become available, my reorder point and my reorder quantity. And I do not have to have a value for reorder point. It means when I hit 0 on hand, it will suggest an order. Okay, now if I have a reorder point, let's say of 10, and I fall below 10 at any point, it will then suggest for me a reorder quantity. Now, if I'm using fixed reorder quantity, obviously I have to have a reorder quantity. So if this is blank and I run planning, it will give me a warning and it will say not all items were planned, and then it will give you a list of what items were. And it'll actually tell you that you have a reorder quantity that's blank, but you have a fixed reorder quantity policy set up for the item. So it'll actually help you understand where you need to go to update it. Now, what I fill into these fields matters. So I have a reorder point and a reorder quantity. So when I hit 0, the system's going to recommend I order 5. Okay. Now, currently I have an order multiple. We'll blank this for now, but we're going to come back to that. When I'm in a fixed reorder policy, you don't need any order modifiers. You are literally telling the system exactly how many you want to buy. So whether it's 5, 10, 100, 10,000, you tell the system the exact number. You do not need a minimum order quantity because you're ordering 10. You don't need a maximum because you're ordering 10. Okay, and so the fixed reorder policy is a fixed quantity, and you don't need any other pieces of information to get suggestions. Okay, so with these two fields set, a reorder point of 0, and I have 0 on hand, and a reorder quantity of 10, that is going to trigger a suggestion for me. So we're going to come back here. Actually, I'm going to pop this out into its own window just so that we can circle back to it here in a bit. And then we're going to go back to our planning worksheet and we're going to run planning. Now, for anybody that's trying to follow along on their own, this calculate regenerative plan is under prepare. I don't like to have to click twice, so I simply moved it over to my home screen. And so that's where I'm running planning from. Now, before I talk about all of these fun little toggles and things that you can do to control your planning, know that I'm filtered to that one specific record and my one specific location. So I'm only taking into account one piece of information, and that is the card we just looked at. So I'm going to run this, and it's going to give me a suggestion for 10 because I have 0. When I'm at or below 0, it will buy 10. So it did exactly what I want it to do. So far, so good. We have a successful run of MRP. I can use the tools that are available to find out why something just happened. So this particular line, I can see that there's a reorder point and a reorder quantity in play. And so the parameter value is blank, which means 0. I have 0, so this is how many I actually have. And then it tells me to reorder 10, and it's ordering 10. So it did exactly what it needed to. So from this screen, I can audit and figure out why it's doing what it's doing, okay? Now we'll go back and since we have that stock keeping unit open, we'll go ahead and change some parameters here. And so we're going to make this 10 and this 100. Okay. And I don't have to close out of anything. We'll just jump back and run our planning one more time. And so the only difference is instead of ordering 10, it ordered 100 because that's the new value that I filled in. Again, parameter value went from 0 to now a reorder point of 10. Again, I have 0. So that's just helping you kind of visualize where those fields are coming into play in terms of auditing why the system is happening. Now, I'll get on a little soapbox here. When you run planning, you should know before you click the button what you're expecting to have happen. If you run planning and you get a whole list of results and then you try to figure out why it's doing what it's doing, you've already shot yourself in the foot because you're not going to necessarily know where to go, what to look for to understand how this works. So always start in a sandbox and start with a very simple example and then build off of that. So before you run it for the first time, you're in a sandbox, you've set up an item, no inventory or anything like that, and then you're going to plan for it so that you know how to control the results before you start adding all the variables such as orders from customers, demand from production orders or assembly orders or whatever the case may be. All right. So we're going to jump back. We're going to reuse this item, but we'll switch up the policy on it. So now instead of a fixed reorder quantity, I'm going to switch to lot for lot. And the reason I'm doing that is because this is a good starting point if you keep inventory. So as long as you're okay with products sitting on a shelf, this is a great product or a great policy. If you want to run more lean, lot for lot is the next greatest starting point. And to me, lot for lot's probably the strongest policy because I find it to be the most flexible. Now, before I switch it, because when I switch the policy, these fields become non-editable. And I like to keep it where there's no trip hazards for new users. So if somebody's trying to figure out planning and they're new to Business Central and they come and look at this item, they're going to see lot for lot and they're going to see, oh, there's a reorder point of 10 and a reorder quantity of 100, but I can't make changes to them. So even though these aren't impacting my calculation in any way, it's a red herring. It's going to make somebody think this is the cause of whatever their situation is, but it's really not. So what I like to do is while the fields are editable, go ahead and take the values out. And that way it's not misleading to anybody that might be new or trying to help out, figure out planning. So I switched to lot for lot. I said this is lean inventory management. So this is basically when I have demand, and demand comes from sales orders, comes from production order component lines, it comes from assembly order components, comes from project planning lines, comes from transfer orders, even things such as a purchase return order. That is demand. I have to have a product to send out to my vendor. So believe it or not, that is demand for the system. So you want to know what those demand sources are. But what lot for lot does is it groups demand within certain time periods. So my lot accumulation period, that is how much time passes for when it's going to calculate how much supply is within that time period. So in this case, it's 3 weeks. Okay. Now, like I said, this item has 0 inventory and it actually has 0 demand across the board. Okay. Which is great. So if I have a lot for lot policy and I go and run my planning, what do I expect to have happen is that it doesn't suggest me anything. right? So I run my planning and there's no suggestion, okay? That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. And it's because there's no demand. So if this policy is very lean, I'm not stocking anything. It's grouping any demand that exists, which it doesn't. So it doesn't do anything. Okay. But in a lot for lot environment, especially a fast paced world that we're in today, sometimes you need to have some product on the shelf, even though it's not really a stock policy. You want to base it on orders and demand. And so it may be very variable in terms of your demand, but you want to keep some on the shelf. So if you need a rush order to get shipped out, you can do so. So the lot for lot policy is pretty much the one and only policy that I agree with a safety stock quantity. And what this allows me to do is create that very low level stock amount for this item. So again, zero demand. All I've done is added a safety stock quantity. Okay. With that alone, when I run my plan, now I'm going to get a suggestion because that safety stock quantity is demand. Because what a safety stock does is it takes your out of stock 0 and it resets it. So now when I have 10 on hand to the system, I have 0 on hand. Safety stock basically says, this is the amount of inventory I want to carry, but I don't want the system to touch it. Now I can still ship from it. I can still consume it in production or assemblies or projects, but to the system, it's not there. It's my reset of 0. But what it does allow me to do is keep some on hand, even though it's really looking for those demand sources to trigger a higher quantity. Now, the thing that the planning worksheet does that the requisition worksheet doesn't do is it will give me warnings. Okay. Now, in this case, because this item is out of stock and I have a safety stock quantity, I get an exception that says, hey, bad news, you're trying to order this 3 days ago because I have a safety lead time, and I can't order it in the past, so I get a little exception. It doesn't stop me from ordering it. I have to just check the accept action before I carry it out. Okay, so it's not a big deal, but it does give me that warning. The requisition worksheet wouldn't do it. It would say, hey, everything's fine. But in reality, if I order this today, I'm not going to get it for a couple days. So it just gives me that kind of knowledge that there is a bit of a delay in terms of when I will receive this product. All right, let's keep playing with it. So I have a safety stock quantity of 10. We're going to bump that up to, let's say, 25. But when I order, the vendor that I buy from, I get a discount every time I buy 40. So there's 40 pieces in a case, and I want to make sure that I have 25 pieces on the shelf. So if I had 30, if my quantity on hand was 30, I would not get a recommendation for this. Because my quantity on hand is 0, I'm going to get a suggestion to buy some. But I'm not going to get a suggestion to only buy 25. Because I have an order multiple, it means that whatever quantity I'm ordering has to be wholly divisible by 40, meaning 40, 80, 120, and so on. It has to be a whole number when it comes out at the end. So in this case, the system really wants to order 25, but because of this order multiple, which now makes sense based on my policy, it's going to suggest for me 40. Okay, so now I'm getting to a little bit more sophisticated planning where I'm starting to really control what my quantity is when I run my planning. Okay, now I'm covering a lot of this really fast. Hopefully you guys know that this will be recorded and published so you can go back and rewatch it. But of course, ask questions, keep them in the chat, and I'll try to circle back and leave time for that. Okay. So by adding that order multiplier, I've told the system I want to make sure I get that vendor discount, and I'll hold the additional pieces. So there's 15 additional pieces that will sit in inventory. They'll be fully usable. I can consume them. I can sell and ship them. I can still use them. They're just sitting above my safety stock level, which doesn't hurt the system in any way when I'm in this lot for lot policy. Okay. So jumping back to our stock keeping unit, again, lot for lot's the most flexible. I can do a lot of things with this. And so let's say I don't buy this, I produce this. And I don't want a production order for 40. I want to have my production orders capped at 20. Okay. So now we're getting all kinds of complexity added to our calculation here. We have 0. We need to have 25. When we make it, we need to make 40 at a time, but the maximum per production order is 20. So now I'm doing some load balancing within my planning before I even get to scheduling this. All right. So now what this is going to do is it's going to suggest for me a production order. Doesn't necessarily make sense to do this if I'm purchasing it. You'll just confuse your vendor. But if I make it, whether that's a production order or an assembly order, I may want to split that into smaller orders. Okay. And the numbers can go as high as you want. So this order multiple could be 1,000 and my maximum order quantity 200, right? And so we make it in batches of 200, but we're going to make a full 1,000 every time we make it. Okay. So I've added some complexity. Again, fairly simple math to work this out. But if we calculate our plan one more time, now we're going to get some different information. And I think because I have an exception, it's grouping it together. But the concept is that you can control batch level production by using that maximum order quantity. Now, I think because I, again, triggered an exception warning, it's not honoring everything. But we'll look at some other examples here in a little bit. Okay, so that's my one miss so far. Otherwise, we're batting 1,000. So we'll keep going. All right, so I have this item. We'll leave it pretty basic. By having the safety stock back to 0, we're actually not going to get a suggestion for this anymore. But we're going to go back and look at some other items. So I have all those other stock keeping units in there, and we'll just run this to make sure it's clean. Okay. Now, I said earlier, I wanted to talk through these parameters here. Okay. So right at the top, when I'm running planning, I have MPS and MRP. Okay. And I mentioned the requisition worksheet. You do not have these options. The requisition worksheet just runs one calculation, but it's essentially combining the two. Now, I have them both checked. I want to explain what they are so that you understand. MPS is my independent demand. It's by itself. It's really directly tied to sales orders or forecasts if I use them, which get calculated as part of sales. So MPS is your direct demand or your independent demand. It's by itself. There's nothing, it's not a component of something else. It's independent. And so that's an MPS suggestion. Then you have MRP. This is your dependent demand. And so this is my MPS tells me I need to make a production order. My MRP is going to see the components on that production order, and it's going to calculate for the components. So that's the difference between the two. And I say all that just so that I can tell you, run them together. Unless you're really, really into separation of duties, you can run these two together. And then that way, when you get a suggestion for the components, you're going to also see the production order that it suggested that's triggering the demand for the components. So by running them together, I get a full picture of where the planning is coming from. If I run them separately and I run MRP first, it's not going to see the production demand. So it's not going to see all the component demand because it hasn't created the production order yet. So if you do run them independent, I would recommend your MPS first. Independent demand, it can be by itself. MRP second, because it's dependent on that independent demand. So you have to have kind of a sequence of events for that to happen. Starting date, I always recommend tomorrow, but some people will run this maybe once or twice a week. And so that starting date may be Monday of next week. And we're locked in for everything this week. So tell me what's going on from next week out. But I always recommend tomorrow. It's very hard to plan for today and then get anything done today. So I always recommend a starting date of tomorrow at the minimum. Ending date, this one's variable based on your business. So this should be the longest lead time of what you're planning. So if you're running it wide open and you have an item that has an 11th month lead time, this needs to be a full year so that it encompasses that demand. So that way, if we'll run it the other way. So if I have an item that has a 6-week lead time and my ending date is only 4 weeks out, by the time I see the demand for the 6-month lead time, it's already 2 weeks late. So the ending date needs to be beyond whatever my lead time is for what I'm planning. So whether you filter it, then it's for whatever you're running within your filter. If you run it wide open, which is what I'm going to do next, then you're going to want it to be beyond your longest lead time. Okay. Stop and show first error. I usually leave this off. You're going to see most of the errors on here, and I want it to run through everything first, and then I'll come back and look at the errors afterward. I'm not using a forecast. If you do use forecasting, this is where you would select it. You would also need to set up I believe they've moved it over to inventory setup, which are 2 toggles related to forecasts. One is just for the general forecast and planning, and the other one is for if you use variance with forecasts. And I always recommend turn them both on. Again, they're in my slides for this, so you'll be able to see those screens, and if there's time, we'll jump back and look at it. Okay. And then you can exclude forecast before. So if I want to not plan for things that may not have happened in the past, I can add that here. Okay. Item filtering. It's very important here that you know this is filtering on the item. It is not filtering on production orders or projects or assemblies or even stock keeping units. So even though I highly recommend stock keeping units get set up, you cannot filter based on the stock keeping unit, only the item record. So all SKUs are related to items, but the items are more generic. And so when you filter, you can only go to the item level, not the SKU. Okay. Then you have your filter totals. I do encourage location-based filtering because most likely you're not planning for all locations. In some cases you may be, in which case you would leave this open, but a lot of times there's a planner per location, and so you would have a filter for your specific location. All right, now we're going to run this, and then we're going to add some demand to the system. So when I run it, again, it cycles through everything. I have 2 items that have stock policies. So one is a fixed reorder, the other one's max inventory. And you can, again, see the warnings that tell me the reorder point's 10. I have 0, it orders 50. And then on the max inventory, again, I have a reorder point, but instead of a reorder quantity, it's a maximum inventory. And because I don't have any on hand, it's taking it up to the max. If I had 10, the suggestion would be 90. So maximum inventory can be variable. Just be aware of that. Maximum inventory is a fantastic policy for space constrained storage. So if I have a bin in my warehouse and I can only fit 1 pallet of product in that bin, anything else has to go to overflow, then I'm going to set a max inventory policy to say, fill up that space, but don't go over it. Now there is still an overflow limit and level. So there is a chance you'll go over, but it won't go over by much. So take that into account. I do not see a lot of people using max inventory, but it is a great option for, again, space constrained products. All right, now I'm only getting 2 suggestions. And that's because my MRP location has 0 demand across the board. All right, so what we're going to do is we can see these items. They're going to reappear because they are also in bills of material that we're going to look at. but they're not being triggered because of demand. A lot of people get confused on this. In a fixed reorder, in a maximum inventory policy, the sales demand, the components, the assembly components, those are not what's triggering the suggestions for these. What those are doing is they're taking those products below their reorder point. And that it can be hard for some people to grasp it because they're going to see this suggestion pop up right after they entered a new production order or a new sales order. It's not based on that order. That order happened to take it below the reorder point. And so the reorder point is what is triggering the demand, not necessarily the order. Don't confuse the two here, okay? Because we are going to see these items pop up. Now, to trigger demand, again, we talked about independent demand, so MPS. And so I have 3 finished goods here that are not part of my MRP. They're all independent. One is a standard, very simple bill of material. The other one's a multi-level production bill of material. So for my manufacturers in the facility, this will make more sense. And then finished good assembly to stock, very light manufacturing, but we'll see how these all trigger different things to happen, okay? And we'll talk through each of them. So I'm going to add just 5 pieces to the first one. Think of this, it's going to suggest for me a production order, but it could just as easily suggest a purchase order. So again, it all boils down to the replenishment system of the item or the SKU to get that suggestion. So now we're going to see quite a bit more results come back. Actually, not too many because it's a very simple item. But we see finished good 1000. I can take a look at the components of that, and I can see it's made up of 3 items and 1 non-inventory item with a quantity per of 2. So my expected quantity is 10, 10, 10. Okay, that's important, 3 10s. But my suggestions here are 50, 10, and 100. And that is because this item and this item are not triggered because I put in that order for this item. These both fell below their stock reorder policy, and now they need to be replenished. So again, that's why I wanted to make that point, is that these items are going to show up in my planning, not because I've added that demand, but because they are stocked items that are out of stock, okay, or below their reorder point. Now this lot for lot, we talked about this on the other item. It is based on demand. So as soon as I put in my order for my finished good, I now need to buy my raw material, and it's for the quantity of 10, which is how many are needed to fulfill this production order. And again, if this item was set with a replenishment system of purchase, then the suggestion here would be purchase and not production order, in which case I wouldn't have these. Actually, I would have these 2 lines, but not this one, because those 2 items are still stocked and would still need to be purchased. Okay. Now, one other thing is I have control over this. So this is suggesting a production order. Okay. Now I can switch it and say purchase this instead. By making that change, it did not remove this line. Okay. So you need to understand that if you get 50 suggestions, 300 suggestions, whatever the case is, they may be related to each other. And just because I control and change one doesn't mean it removes the demand for the other lines. Okay, now I can always come and delete it or do something else with it. But if I leave it on production order, I'm really telling the system, do it your normal way. If I switch it to purchase, I'm telling it to do it my way. My way, if it's an exception, is fine. I can use some of the controls in the system to prevent it from making changes to that. But if I don't make those suggestions and I switch it to purchase and I carry this out, what it's going to do is create a purchase order. The next time I run this, it's going to say, hey, you don't buy that item, you make it. So go and cancel that purchase order and make a production order instead. Okay. So there is a field called the planning flexibility, and you would set it to none if I wanted to keep the suggestion of a purchase and allow my purchase order to go through. It used to be in the past, if you've been around the system a long time, that planning flexibility caused some conflicts, potential oversupply, things like that. It's gotten a lot better. So I do recommend you cycle back and in a test sandbox environment, make sure you play with it to see if it makes sense to use now. But that is an option for you as well. Okay. So again, this would make a production order. It's going to also make some purchase orders to, in this case, different vendors. But everything that I have in here is acceptable. There's no warnings, nothing like that. So when I've gotten all the suggestions and I'm happy with it, then I can simply say carry it out. And I'm going to get this option of what do you want to do with the orders that it suggests. So I'm going to recommend you use firm planned. Planned is what I consider to be the planning worksheet itself and not to be used independently, because the planning worksheet wipes out your planned orders, planned production orders, when it gets run. So planned is only good for a very, very brief time in manual situations. But so I would recommend always do firm planned. And then you can also print if you want to. You do have the option to copy to the requisition worksheet. So in that case, I would probably filter my purchases first, and then I would copy those suggestions to the requisition worksheet. And then I can have a purchasing agent handle that side of it. So again, I'm not anti-requisition worksheet. It's just it needs to have its place. And I would recommend in a separation of duties type environment that would make sense. Okay. For the others, you either make it and print or you just make it itself. Again, for purchases, you can have it copied to requisition worksheet. So you would not generally do that for production orders, only for the purchased items. Okay. Now we're not going to carry these out. We're going to just continually run it over and over. So now we're going to get rid of our demand for that finished good 1000, and we're going to look at a manufacturing example. So if you're a manufacturer and you've kind of been chomping at the bit here, this one's for you. This finished good, the standard, very simple item is going to go away, but we're going to get a much more complex result when we look at this multi-level production order. Okay, so now I have a lot more items that fill into my worksheet. Still not a ton, but something to consider. Now, one thing that I really like about how it does the suggestions is it goes through each level at a time. So my finished good, this is my MPS item, my independent demand. And then directly below it are my level ones. So I have a subassembly, and then I have a couple raw materials that are part of the bill of material for this production order. And then below the level 1 subassembly, I have a level 2 subassembly. So part of the components of the level 1 is a level 2. And then below the level 2 are my level 3 raw materials. So they're kind of sequential going up and down. And you can track it. This is my probably hands down favorite part of the system, is I have this button up here called order tracking. And when you talk about planning and getting started and knowing why did it do what it did, okay, you need to know how to audit this and understand what it's doing. So again, I'm on my deepest level for this bill of material, and I'm going to click order tracking. And what it's going to do is it's going to show me the hierarchy of everything that it's done to get to this suggestion. So at the very top is my sales order, where I'm planning FG 2000, and I need 5 of those. So my FG 3000 must have a quantity per of 10 because I need 50 of these, and so it's giving me a planning component for that line. And then because of the FG 3000, it's planning FG 4000. And again, probably a 1 quantity per because I need 50, it's buying or creating 50. And then same thing, quantity per 1 for the material, multi-level 3000. And so I can see the whole chain, and they're indented So I know why something happened. And this is huge when you get into planning. You want to be able to know why it's happening, where a date's being missed, where's the quantity coming together, especially on lot for lot type items where it may be suggesting an order for 100, but that 100 is made up of 30 different orders. Okay. It would list all 30 orders that make up the quantity for a lot for lot item. So you have full visibility into why something is happening if you know where to look. So order tracking is the key for anything that is either order or lot for lot. And then the warning box for anything that is like a stock policy, my fixed reorder or my max inventory, I go to the warning box to pull that up. Okay. Now, in some cases where this raw material is also listed as a bill of material, sometimes it will show here in the order tracking. Most of the time it will not. So if it is a true stocked item, then you generally won't see any order tracking visibility. And that's where you use that warning field to really identify, oh, that's a max inventory, and here's why it's doing what it's doing. Okay. Other things to take into account is it doesn't matter whether it's a production order or a purchase for the components. It's simply going to do whatever you told it to do when it makes it. But here's raw materials that are purchased and there's no default vendor. So I do need to make a decision here in my suggestion before I can actually carry out these lines. Some of these others have a default vendor populated automatically. And so if I do not, then I need to fill that in, make that decision on who to buy from before I carry the action out. Now, a lot of people get tripped up on this because it says vendor number. And if I click into it, all of a sudden the list is empty. Okay. Well, this field does not look up to your vendor list. Okay. That wouldn't quite make sense because you can't buy product from everybody. There's specific vendors that supply specific parts. And so for that reason, this looks up to the item vendor catalog, which is who are the vendors that sell me this particular item. And then it would show me, you know, lead time calculations, things like that. I wish this also showed me the cost, but it does not. It's really just who are the vendors and what are their lead times. And then based on who I change or who I select, my order date will change. So your due date when it's needed does not change based on your vendor, but the order date does. So this is the final tidbit of information that I'll give you is you may be planning for 12 months out, okay? And you may have items that are listed 50 times over and over again because you buy it every 2 weeks, okay? And so you're going to get a whole bunch of suggestions in here. Well, what you want to do before you carry this out is you typically want to go to your order date field and you want to say filter to this value. Or you may get more sophisticated with it, open up the filter and say, you know, I want anything from 12/1/25 to, helps if I finish my range, 12/5/25, right? And so now I'm going to get anything that I need to buy. So this order date is when I need to buy it by. And so these are the items I need to buy this week so that they hit their due dates. Okay, so I highly recommend people use this order date as a way of filtering the list before you run your carryout action. Helps quiet down the noise, even though something may be planned with a really short lead time, but it's 6 months out in the future. This order date will get rid of that information. So these are the items I need to pay attention to right now to make sure that I can meet all of my demands, whether that's from sales or from components, things like that. But just remember, if I do that filter, my production order wasn't on that list, okay? Because it's not needed till 12/17. But some of the material that I need for it, I need to order now so that if I make it by the 17th, that I'm going to do it. So I would encourage you to make sure you're going to make the production orders that it suggests before you start buying your material for them. Because if I don't end up making this for another 3 months, I've got material sitting on the shelf way longer than it needs to. All right. So those are some pieces of information for you. How to run it, kind of suggestions that come out of it. I will cover one other thing. Inventory setup has gained a lot of the planning fields. This used to not exist. So this use forecast on locations and use forecast on variance. Those are the two fields I recommend you turn on, as well as this combined MPS MRP calculation. If this is off, you cannot run it combined. So turn that on and then you can run them at the same time. Now, not all planning fields are here. So whether you run manufacturing or not, you have access to manufacturing setup. And there's a planning tab in there. For the most part, you're going to leave these fields blank at this point. The components at location has a purpose, but only in a single location environment. So for the most part, leave them blank and just trust the inventory setup is where you need to go to factor that stuff in. All right. With that being said, I want people to know I've recorded all of this in the PowerPoint. So you've got all the information about the different policies, what to consider, what not to consider, so that you can do this on your own. But you've got to do it all in a sandbox, in a test environment, and just play with it so that you get comfortable with it before you start rolling this out to your production environment. And with that, I appreciate everybody listening, and I will turn it over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Ben. And great presentation. All right, I'm going to get set to share my screen, and we're going to continue our journey with Business Central this afternoon. And I will be walking through a bit of a PowerPoint, and I'm going to do things a little differently than Ben. I'm going to do PowerPoint first, and then we'll spend some time looking at Business Central screens. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. So at this stage, you should be able to see my screen, and the title sort of speaks for itself. We're going to spend some time talking about what's new in the current version of Business Central. For those of you that have existing environments, you may have noticed that the updates are paused temporarily. Microsoft's working through some technical challenges with getting all of the environments updated, and we'll resume once we get past those challenges. As we, there we go. So a little bit about me. I'm not going to spend much time here. I'm Andrew Good. I'm CEO at Liberty Grove Software. We're a partner that spends a lot of time in manufacturing, but food and beverage in particular. We've been at it for 27 years. I've been at it for about 24. I have a passion for sharing information and helping people out. So I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. And by way of training, I am a professional engineer. Now, slightly different meaning depending on where you are. I'm actually based out of Toronto. So this is a designation that applies to the province of Ontario. And when the weather permits, I'd love to sail. So that is one of the things that does distract me from Business Central. As we move through and we look at Business Central, we've got two major releases every year. There are the minor releases that occur in between. So in total, there are 12 different versions of the product every year. Our primary focus is going to be on these major releases because this is where most of the new features and functions become available in the product. And then when we do the walkthrough, I'll show you how to look at some of these features as well. What we want you to walk away from is, get a sense of what has changed, what's in the product now that maybe you can take advantage of or plan to take advantage of in the coming months. Not everything I show you will be available in the first version. Some of it is going to be available in May or June, and I've tried to call that out as we go through the different pages. We'll do an overview from a BC perspective and functionality. We'll quickly run and look at the new functionality. We'll have time for a walkthrough, and I'm going to encourage you to use the chat, or if you do have questions, I will do my best to monitor those as we go through the session today. I'm going to look at the world initially sort of from a functional perspective. So we'll start with finance, and we'll look at the different changes in each area. I tried to group things in what I thought was a logical way, order. So in the finance, we have the self-billing for purchases. Well, what the heck does that mean, and why would I care? Self-billing for purchases, you may have some, I hate to say it, but I'm going to, unsophisticated suppliers, or you may have situations where essentially you have consignment inventory. So as you draw that inventory out, you want to record the purchase in BC, and you want to automatically essentially create that purchase invoice for your vendor. So it's a concept that is now supported in BC, and you'll walk away as well with reference material, so you can get to each of these features and functions in more detail as well. That'll be included at the end of the presentation. Calculate withholding taxes from vendors. Well, personally, I hadn't come across this until late last year with a customer, and the situation that they have is they're in the agricultural business, and when they receive deliveries from certain, in their case, farmers, they actually need to calculate a withholding tax and remit that to the state agency. This is now becoming base functionality in Business Central, your ability to actually calculate these taxes and remit that on behalf of your vendors. Expense reports have been introduced in this version. So expense reports allowing the employees to go in, obviously, and categorize their expenses, and then submit those expenses for approval. So that is something new within the product. Traditionally you've had to go outside of BC for the tools, and so this helps to address, I would start to say, some of the more straightforward requirements that you might have. Calculate taxes for plastics and sugar. Well, don't you store sugar and plastic? No. As both sustainability initiatives and environmental initiatives are underway, and health and well-being initiatives are underway, there are governments that are starting to collect taxes based on the amount of plastic contained within a product, as an example, or the sugar content. And then you can think about this with some of the news you've probably seen around sugary drinks. I'm going to pick on them, even though we do food and beverage work, but high sugar drinks. So the intent here is you now have the ability in Business Central to define those tax rules, calculate those taxes, to be able to manage more of the tax information right in the product. Taxes. Seems like we have taxes, and more taxes, but you now also have the ability to set up rules to calculate excise taxes. So if you're in an industry that deals with excise taxes, you've had to address this issue either outside the system completely, through customizations, or through an ISV. So now you've got some functionality in the base product to allow you to go ahead and calculate and manage that tax information initially without filing, but to be able to calculate the taxes and generate reports within BC. Enable investment to boost fixed assets. So various agencies, governments have come up with strategies to allow companies to accelerate the depreciation of their investments. So some of, the example that you'll see if you drill into the help text is you have the ability to write off an additional 20% of the asset value in the first year, in addition to the normal depreciation. So conceptually, you purchase your asset, you are able to write off 20%, and then that establishes your asset value for the depreciation calculations that's now at 80% of the original purchase price. So additional functionality in the finance area. And as we move into sales and purchasing, you'll notice that there's been a bit of a focus on drop shipments. So traditionally, drop shipments have had the sales and purchase activity locked together. And so this has, it's been a bit clunky. It's been a bit challenging at times. And now now you have the ability to independently post a purchase invoice and split that away from posting the sales invoice. Related to this as well is, it used to be once you posted your shipment, you had to follow that transaction through. You had to generate credits. It was an ordeal to unship or reverse a shipment. You now have the ability to reverse shipments. There are a couple of caveats that go with this. Those shipments cannot have been invoiced yet. So as long as they're in that shipped, not invoiced state, or you can go ahead and you can reverse that particular shipment. And as well, normally you had to, as you created your POs, you couldn't do it directly from the sales order. So you now have a function directly on that sales order to create a PO straight from there. It relies on some static data, master data setup. And if that's of interest to you, you can dig into that a little bit. Not very hard to configure. It starts to rely on some of the pieces that Ben was highlighting earlier related to item cards and vendors and SKUs and default suppliers. Email notifications. A lot of us now are fairly familiar with the ability to send out an order confirmation, email out a quote from BC. This functionality has now been extended to a couple of other key areas, at least on the sales side. The ability to email out or generate an email when a sales shipment is posted. So you can actually send a sales shipment document by email. And similarly, if you're dealing with sales return orders and those goods have been received, you can now send out an email notification to say, thank you very much, your RMA 123 has been received and is being evaluated. Improved invoicing. For anybody that uses the functions like get receipt lines, get shipment lines, and that's why it's get ... You now have some additional filters and functions, or some additional filters that you can apply during those get processes to allow you to zero in on activity in a more useful way. And the related to this is the introduction of get order lines related to purchase invoicing. And this starts to overlay with some of the functionality that I'm sure is envisioned in and around the purchase agent, the payables agent in BC. And this allows you to go ahead and find and retrieve lines that tie to an invoice, but your vendor might have given you one invoice that relates to 3 different POs. So it's, one line off of each of the 3 POs. So the get order lines allows you to go and pull that information into your purchase invoice in an easier fashion. Description 2, this has been around for a long time in the product. and often it was a hidden field, and then at one point developers were needed to make it available on your item card as an example. And great, it's there, but it's not on an item journal, it's not on a sales invoice or a sales order line. So now this field has been added to a significant number of pages, so it becomes more useful to have this information in BC. Supply chain and inventory. The quality management feature was introduced in the previous version. It has been enhanced a bit in this version, so that's why it gets mentioned yet again. Item variants. So you now have the ability to do a couple things with item variants. One, you can add pictures to those item variants, and then you can go in and you can define item attributes. We'll see why that might be interesting in a moment as we get through and we talk about e-commerce, but it is functionality that's leveraged further elsewhere in the system. But it's nice improvements. We've seen some improvements around item variants and stock keeping units over the last couple of versions. So it's nice to see that level of attention, because this also then supports planning process as well. Approvals. Traditionally, approvals have been available for master data, new customers, new vendors, new items, as well as financial journals. You're creating a general journal. That journal can be then sent for approval. We had document approvals on purchasing and sales side. But one area where it wasn't present were the item journals and the planning and requisition worksheets. So wait a sec, this overlaps quite nicely with what Ben was discussing. You now can establish workflows and approvals for item journals. So if somebody is going to make a miscellaneous transaction, you can allow people to create those journals but not post them, and then send them for approval. Similarly, you can have somebody do the planning and somebody else review and approve the action messages and carry out the activities related to that worksheet. So new area, some additional control. It's configurable, so you can configure it based on how you want to use Business Central. And planning, locations without SKUs. Well, you heard Ben talking earlier about stock keeping units, aka SKUs. And by default, if going through the planning process, the SKU card is reviewed by the planning engine to see what planning parameters are there. If they're not there, it would typically look at the item card. Here you now have some more granular controls about if the information's missing, do I skip this item for this location? Or if the information's missing, do I go and look at the item card and use those planning parameters? Because you may have a use case where I'm only going to set up SKUs for the locations that should have that inventory. For the other locations, I've got a dozen locations. For the other locations, I don't set up the SKU because, I'm not going to be selling a whole lot of snow shovels in Miami. So you may choose not to set up a SKU for the Miami location, but it's really popular in Minneapolis. Copilot. We're going to, you can constantly hear about Copilot and AI. The expense agent was announced. However, the expense agent is not found in the documentation. That's why I've got it marked as TBD. I think it's taking them longer to get it configured the way they want. And they may have also changed the approach on this a little bit. The configurable agent technically is not part of this release. It was in 27.5 and from a preview. We'll have a look at this when I do my walkthrough shortly. And also Microsoft has improved the troubleshooting ability for the MCP server. What's an MCP server? It's essentially the server that allows an AI agents to talk to and utilize your Business Central data in a controlled manner. So they've improved the troubleshooting and connectivity between AL, which is the programming language in BC, and the MCP server. E-commerce. The Spotify relationship has been around for a while, and what we're seeing with each new build and version of the product is the connectors enhanced. So here we've got functionality update to the latest connector. What happens, you've managed your BC environments, you have versions of BC, you have versions of extensions in your extension management or apps. This helps to keep you up to date with the most current Shopify connector so that you're able to take advantage of the new features as they become available. It helps just to maintain that connectivity and keep you up to date. Collection synchronization. What's a collection? The analogy that's provided in the Microsoft documentation is really more around the example that was given was around clothing, where you've got color, size, and style. And with that, you want that information to be made available to Shopify. And when you make it available to Shopify, Shopify can configure itself so that you select the style that you're interested in, and then you can pick the color, and then you can confirm the size, and Shopify organizes that and can set that information up accordingly on their side to present from a e-commerce user perspective, like me. When I hit the site, I can see things organized in a logical fashion, but you can structure your BC data, assign item attributes to that BC data, define those item attributes as something that you want to be used in the synchronization process, and then Shopify uses that to set up what they're calling product options. Shopify, if you're dealing with a US site and a Canadian site, you might actually have two separate sites, or you might have one site with a currency selector. However, when the user checks out and completes their transaction, is it in USD? Is it in Canadian dollars? Now, when you're creating that corresponding sales order in BC, it's in the currency that was used during the checkout process. So it's mirroring that currency. Up until this point, obviously that wasn't the case. And product images. So now you have the ability to leverage images that are in Business Central and bring them across. Now that we have images on the variants and the ability to attach attributes to those variants, not only can we set up those other products, but we can also bring across the corresponding pictures. Manufacturing's got some attention as well in the last couple of releases. Subcontracting and the additional subcontracting features are slated to be made available this June. Includes the ability to have more logistics functionality and around warehouse handling and item tracking, providing more pricing flexibility. Traditionally, you could go in and define at a routing line level the price that you were going to pay a subcontractor for a particular service, so that now you have more flexibility, so that if you're sending something out to get painted from your Chicago location, you can have one price, and if you're sending it out to be painted from your Georgia location, you can have a different price. So that level of pricing flexibility has been introduced. And the next item is, again, just around item tracking and warehouse handling. You've got more flexibility for handling those particular features in the subcontracting area. Again, it was an area where subcontracting was a good, useful function. They've decided to focus on it and help improve it. Overall visibility is improved as well. And then just some general usability improvements, because as an example, when you would create an output journal or a production journal where you're outputting serialized items, you might be manufacturing 10 of them, but then you had to go into item tracking and then you had to create 10 item tracking lines, or you had to copy your journal line down 10 times so that you could enter the serial number information on each and every output line and then post it. So you now have functionality that if you're outputting a serialized item, it's got 10 items or a quantity of 10. Business Central, when it generates that journal, either through exploding the routing or opening up the production journal, you're now going to be presented with 10 output lines so you can quickly output those serialized items. Small stuff, but it's removing some of those thorns that people have had to deal with. Locations respect capacity and overhead, or respected for capacity and overhead. The posting that takes place when you record your capacity and your overhead, Business Central goes and uses your inventory posting setup to determine what GL accounts it's going to hit. And with that GL, or with that, the location is a component of which is needed to determine which set of accounts to use. So for capacity and overhead, they used to keep going back to the blank location and the product posting group to determine which set of capacity and overhead to use. Now, the location, you can have different GL accounts for your Chicago and Georgia locations. And similarly, additional controls and improvements have been made in and around WIP posting, just so you don't end up trying to post transactions into the blank account and then when you finish the production order, that's going to try and take it out of the Georgia location. So there have been some general posting improvements made as well. And for those of you that live and breathe in manufacturing and you're, in the engineering realm or the new product introduction setup, you're often dealing with non-certified BOMs, and you used to get warnings saying, this BOM isn't certified. Do you really want to proceed? And it got kind of annoying, especially if you're in and out of that all day. So you now have the ability to determine whether or not you want that warning to pop up. Some general improvements that have been made. The general improvements, the ability to migrate from any SQL server to the cloud. There was previously some version limitations around this. They've managed to open that up so that you can take your existing environment from any SQL server and migrate to the cloud. Obviously, that's where Microsoft wants you to end up. Permissions. So there have been some improvements here as well, and primarily around auditing the user and group permissions across multiple apps. One of the challenges with this is when you install a new app, that new app may have additional permission sets that get applied to users. Those app permission sets might conflict or be additive to your existing permission sets. And all of a sudden, somebody that perhaps was supposed to have indirect access into the general ledger entries now has direct access and can go in and do whatever they want. So you now have the ability to go in and audit and look at those permissions. The admin center. So this is where system administrators go in. They can see the multiple environments. You can look at telemetry. You can control when you get notified, schedule updates, and things like that. But now that admin center can be accessed and connected to AI agents using the MCP server. This is in a preview mode, so it's not final, but it is part of the initiative Microsoft's got has underway so that you can then create agents to monitor what's going on in an admin center. If you're in a distributed environment where you have multiple instances, perhaps different tenants across different countries, it's a tool that allows you to start to get some good overview. Service, not a lot of improvements in the service area, but there have been some improvements to the service contract. When you're creating service orders, you now have the ability to, when you create those service orders from a service contract, to enforce a rule that says you can only have one service item per service order. So it is a new configuration setting available there. There are a number of development improvements. I didn't call them out for the purpose of today's sessions, but for the developers in the crowd or the people in the crowd that have developers, you can encourage them to go and look at the documentation in and around development improvements. Financial reporting, the financial reporting functionality has been extended a little further. You now have the ability to add in logos to your PDF documents. You've got some global control over negative number formatting, how you want that handled as an organization. You also, from a individual user perspective, the ability to override that in certain cases. And then this is a neat one, an audit log. Who ran these reports? When did they run them? And how are they going to, so now you can go in and see who ran what when. You can also create a schedule for these reports for distribution groups. So your operations managers need these reports, Monday mornings. So you can schedule them to run over the weekend, so they're in the inbox Monday mornings. There's some new APIs for auditing workflows and analyzing permissions. And these APIs expose the data, and that exposed data can be made available to MCP servers and other areas. There have been some improvements made in inventory, and also the Word report layout tool has been updated. So if you are using the report layout tool, go and grab the latest add-in for Word. There have been more than a couple of improvements, but a couple of improvements I'm highlighting for Power BI. Subscription billing is a new app that is available for Power BI. And the manufacturing app has been updated to incorporate subcontracting. There have been a number of inventory reports that were refreshed with new Excel and Word layouts. And you've got the ability now to apply statuses to your report layouts. So that if you have, let's say you're getting set to do a rebranding exercise for the organization, you can have a whole series of new layouts all queued up, but not activated, so that you can then, on the new brand day, April 1st, since that's always a great day to introduce a new brand. On April 1st, you can go in and you can deactivate your old layouts and approve and activate your new layout. So a lot more control beyond what you have had in the past. Power BI apps, we've already talked about Power BI apps before. You do have subscription billing that has been introduced. For those of you that haven't had a look at these apps, I would encourage you to have a look at it. A lot of time and effort has been invested in the Power BI apps, including what is referred to as drill back capability now within the apps. And with that brings us quickly to a walkthrough. I got a couple of things I just want to highlight here, and then we'll get set to wrap up. So we're going to go ahead and grab our Business Central. Sorry. So let's have a look at a couple of different things. First off, we're going to look at items. We're going to focus in on one item in particular. So I'm interested in my 1006 Airpot or Auto Drip Light. Why am I picking on this particular one? Because I just really want to highlight some of the work that's been done in and around the item variants. So we can see here, we're now in the item variant list. I've already highlighted the fact that we can have pictures at a variant level. In addition to having pictures at the variant level, I can go in and assign attributes to these variants. I did go in and just set up the color for this particular one. So we have black. As we move to the next item, we have red, and so on. So you now have the ability to assign those attributes to your item variants. When you go to plan this particular item, then you can go in and set up your stock keeping units, and you can manufacture these products with a slightly different bill of material to account for the different colors. I'm going to return back to the Roll Center, and on the Roll Center, I'll highlight a couple more things. One of which is some of these inventory reports. I've run them ahead of time because I'm never sure how quickly they'll render. So I have the top 10, the inventory top 10 list, and this is one of the reformatted reports, and this is an Excel layout. So here we can see the top 10 list from a print perspective and organized for further analysis. And for those of you that have worked with Business Central and Nav for a long period of time, we always used to have the box at the top right that said what filters was used, when was it run, and the report details. So we have that in our About report. So what environment did it come from, what company, who ran it, what time was it run. So this information is available. We'll see that we have and this is an area where a couple of reports have been deprecated and they've been replaced by a new report. This particular item age composition has 2 tabs on it, well, multiple tabs, but the primary focus here is around quantity and value. So this is our value tab. And the nice thing is, obviously, now that we're in Excel and we have the ability to apply filters, we can look at the same information from a quantity perspective. We can go into an analysis mode and I can start to apply filters here and look at a filtered list. I can filter that down to individual items and then clear the filters. So didn't want to dig any deeper. And then we have our About the Report tab at the bottom. And quality management, all you have to do is use Tell Me to go and find out a bit more information about quality management. I will highlight the fact that I do have a Copilot window open here, and I just gave it a prompt, help me understand how to use quality. So not only are the features now available in the base product, you can leverage Copilot to do a little more research and help you configure the features within Business Central. So just wanted to highlight that here. And finally, the configurable agent tool is a new tool that is available in Business Central, where I can go in and I can create an agent or new agents. Once I've created the agent, this SV is an example of an agent that I created, and it has tasks, and these tasks ran into a particular error. I can drill into that task, and the nice thing is you have some examples of how to set up agents to start working with your Business Central data. With the agent, the configurable agent tool, I gave it a very simple task the first time I tried it out. Said I need to review all of my customers and understand who's got opening balances, what those balances are, and of those with opening balances, which ones are past due. Simple use case, but it was a starting point. I could then go ahead and say, okay, for those that are past due, please prepare reminders, and I could set that up to come out through the agent. So with that, I will check and see if there are any questions, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time. You will have the slides available, and here are a number of, we've got YouTube videos. CentralQ.ai is a great tool for general Business Central questions. It does have access to the Learn documentation and documentation from a number of ISVs, so it can provide very contextual, specific responses. Some release notes for this wave. The version manager link gives you a table that shows different features when they were introduced, and then also the ability to carry or click through to the corresponding Learn documentation for each new feature. BC links at the second one from the bottom. These are all the links related to Business Central. There's a ton of content in the Microsoft realm plus the community realm. So this gets you to all the Microsoft content, and LE is what the Microsoft refers to as their launch event. So when Microsoft came out with this version, they also released 37 videos that take a lot more time to go through that will walk you through the features we've looked at today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew and Ben. What great sessions. First off, I want to make sure everybody on the call knows that we will be, this is recorded, and we'll have the slide decks available shortly after the meeting today. We'll get those uploaded. They'll be on the DCI website. And you'll also receive an email with the link through the Learners platform shortly with the presentation information. So again, just a big kudos to Andrew and Ben. What great sessions. And for now, what we'll do is, this is for you guys. We're going to open the floor, questions for the topics today. Other questions, you guys feel free to take yourself off of mute and let us know. All right, so I guess no questions, which is great. That means y'all did a fantastic job. But again, this will be available after the meeting, and we look forward to seeing everyone at our upcoming events. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great rest of your day.